My name is Drew, and you're watching ReadyBudgetGo. If we haven't met before, welcome. I'm glad you found your way here. And if you've been here before, welcome back. It's good to see you again. This is My Money Relaunch, a series where I talk about all the things I did to take control of my financial life after I dug myself out of debt for the second time. Before we go into today's topic, there's a couple points I need to cover. First, I'm not a financial advisor. This series is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Before making any moves with your money, do your own research and seek your own counsel. Second, while I'm talking, I will be putting down stickers in this paint by sticker book. If you're not new to this series, I previously was saving $2 per sticker, but because I'm constrained in how much I can set aside this month, I'm adjusting that to $1 per sticker, at least for December. The point is to keep saving. And now with all that out of the way, let's jump into today's topic. If you've been watching this series from the start, then you will know that I've been covering what I call the STRIVE method, which stands for saving and spending, taxes, retirement, insurance, investments, and estate planning. I choose one of these areas to focus on each month. The first time I went through it, which would have been the first 6 months after paying off all my debt, it was hell. There's a lot of heavy lifting the first time around, but it gets smoother every time afterward. I won't say it gets easier, because as you go along you take on more complex tasks, but it's not as onerous as writing out every single financial transaction you made over the previous 6 months, which is called a spending analysis. That's what I did the first time I went through saving and spending, and now I want to talk about what I did with the data once I had collected it. That brings me to this week's topic, which is budgeting. Specifically, I want to talk about shitty budgets, because your first budget is going to be a mess. I've been talking about this recently here on my YouTube channel in both my November 2025 Budget With Me video and December 2025 Budget With Me video, when I compared this year's monthly budgets against last year. My 2025 budgets are still far from perfect, but I've improved a lot in the past 12 months. And really, there is no such thing as the perfect budget. You're never going to be able to anticipate every expense, especially not down to the penny. Some you can, and those are called fixed costs, things that don't change from month to month. These are typically things like your housing payment, your car payment, some of your utilities like your cell phone and home internet, things like that. But your variable expenses, things like food, gasoline, clothing, entertainment, and the like, are just that, variable. I don't think I've ever spent the exact same amount of money on food from one week to the next, and I know I've never been able to budget for it down to the penny. That doesn't mean that my budget is bad or wrong, just that sometimes all you can do is make estimates. The purpose of doing the spending analysis, as I mentioned before, is to gather the data that will inform how you make your first budget. If you have no idea how much you've been spending in a given budget category, how can you plan how much you're going to spend in the future? This is especially true if you're in the habit of making cash withdrawals from your bank account and then not tracking where the money's going. There's nothing wrong with using cash, as long as you track it. You might think you're spending only $80 on food per week because that's what your spending analysis tells you, when in reality it could be 3 or 4 times that much because you take money out of the cash machine and blow it at a restaurant. Cash is what I call the black hole of budgeting for exactly that reason. Money comes out of your bank account in the form of cash, and then you lose all sense of where it goes. Of course, you can track it, but that takes discipline. Unless you save all your receipts, there's no record of where you spent that money. For that reason, I've never subscribed to the cash is king mentality when it comes to spending habits. I also don't believe credit cards are the enemy. In fact, I love my credit cards. I get cash back and other rewards for using them, and they give me purchase protection, fraud protection, and other benefits, and there's always a record of every single transaction. If someone steals my wallet full of credit cards, I'm protected. If I spent only cash and my wallet was stolen, I'd be screwed. To be sure, there are some people who absolutely should not use credit cards. Impulsive shoppers, compulsive shoppers, and anyone who views a line of credit as the same thing as money in the bank should stay away from credit cards and really any form of consumer credit, including buy now, pay later. This is also a classic example of where financial gurus can lead you astray. Many will tell you to spend only cash or use a debit card if you must, which is all well and good until you need to buy something that isn't easily paid for in cash. Almost any travel purchase, for example, whether it's airline tickets, car rentals, hotels, cruises, none of those are easy to purchase without a credit card. Yes, you can use a debit card, but in some cases, like with car rentals and hotels, they may place a hold on funds, effectively freezing them and reducing your available balance. This can cause a severe cash crunch. Going cash only can also make budgeting more difficult. For example, let's say my electric bill comes in $50 higher than I budgeted. If I use cash or a debit card, I'd better make sure I have that $50 to cover the overage. The power company wants their money. But if I use a credit card, I have at least 30 days, and sometimes much longer, depending on when the statement closes, to absorb it. Okay, enough of my soapbox about credit cards, though it's one of my favorite hobby horses, so I probably will bring it up again in the future. Let's get back to budgeting. But before we get too far into it, there's one other small point I want to make, and that is about the word budget. It's really not a pleasant word. It's not fun to say, what with all those hard consonants, and over time it's come to be synonymous with a lot of unfun things like deprivation and making do. Using a different term if the word budget makes your skin crawl. I like spending plan or even just plan as an alternative. Budget is okay for me, otherwise I wouldn't have put it in my business name, but it's not for everyone. The spending analysis that you did the first time through Strive will give you an idea of your fixed and variable costs over time. When I revisited mine, I made sure I had everything categorized, added everything up, then took an average of each category across 6 months. I can already hear the protests, but 3 months ago we went to Europe, and we don't do that every year. The spending analysis will be full of one-offs. Don't discount them. This isn't your final budget, this is just an exercise to give you an average of what you spent in a typical month over the last 6 months. Once you have your averages, look at the final numbers. Do any of them surprise you? Does the total match up with what you earn in a typical month? It may be helpful to jot down any of your initial thoughts, whether that's something like, I can't believe we didn't put any money into savings, or I know we eat out more than this. That must be where some of that cash is going. Remember, cash is its own category. Unless you have a receipt, it cannot be categorized into anything else. No guessing is allowed. The point is not to endure self-recrimination or to scold other members of your household for their reckless spending. The point is to know where you have been going so that you can make a better decision on where you'd like to go in the future. Now it's time to make a for real budget. But again, this is just a first draft. First, write down how much income you expect to make for the month you're budgeting. Be truthful and conservative. Better to plan for a smaller income and have money left over than to plan for the best case scenario and end up short when it comes time to pay your expenses. Next, put in all the expenses that are regular, fixed, and recurring. These are things like your housing payment, car payment if you have one, insurance premiums, home internet, streaming services, potentially your cell phone bill, anything that you pay every single month where the amount does not change. Now, write down anything for that month that you may not spend every single month, but which you know will be coming up. For example, if you get your hair cut every 6 weeks and you aren't going to the salon this month, put it in for next month. If you have children in sports where dues or fees are going to be required, put those in. Don't put in any equipment or clothing just yet, that comes later. Your spending analysis may help jog your memory of the kinds of things that you may be responsible for, even if you don't have all of last year's spending. In other words, let's say you're budgeting for March, but your spending analysis covers May through November. It's still worthwhile to look through the pages. If you see that you spend money to send your daughter to a campout with her Girl Scout troop in July, that might remind you that you need to set money aside for a couple boxes of cookies in your March budget. I like the Samoas the best. Once your fixed and regular expenses and other must-pay line items are accounted for, it's time to allocate money to the variable categories. This covers food, gas for your car, entertainment, clothing, gifts, household expenses, sporting goods, pet supplies, and so on. I want to point out here that variable is not the same thing as discretionary, just as fixed expenses are not the same as mandatory. Your Netflix subscription is a fixed expense. It's the same cost every month, but you can get by just fine without it. Similarly, food is a variable expense, but good luck going an entire month without eating. Savings should be a fixed expense, but when you're new to budgeting, you may want to leave it as a variable expense until you know how much you can safely put away each month. And yes, savings is an expense. It's not a bucket of fun money. This is money that you're putting away for an emergency or other dire need, not a slush fund for overspending. That said, it's not a bad idea to leave a little wiggle room in your budget, if you are able, for when bills come in higher than expected. I like to make a list of all my variable expenses for the month first, then deduct the sum of my fixed expenses from my income to see how much I have left to put toward the variable categories. When I first started budgeting, this number was lower than I would have liked, so I had to reevaluate my fixed expenses. Another method is to put your ideal numbers in, then see whether you balance. If you have money left over, you're on the right track. If you end up with a negative number at the end, it's time to make some choices. Scaling back on spending is one choice, and it's the one that gets most of the attention. But there is another option. Make more money. I'm not being flip when I say that, though I recognize that many people work multiple jobs just to eke out a living. But if your needs and wants exceed the money you have available to you, picking up a part-time job or side hustle isn't a bad idea. It's a matter of what you prioritize. We each get the same number of hours every week. If the thought of spending one more hour working for pay repulses you, then the only other choice is to cut expenses. When expenses exceed income, that's where debt comes from. This is the voice of experience talking here. I've discussed in previous episodes how I got into debt, and everyone's story is different. And there are times when taking on more debt is the best or even the only option. I've had situations in my life where I have been backed into a corner and thought, I can't deal with this. So I dug out my credit card to make the scary problem go away, and then I spent the next several months or years paying off the credit card. While I wish things could have been different, I don't regret taking on the debt because I did it with intention. I wasn't a victim, except maybe of circumstance. I knew what I was signing up for when I charged. Once you have a budget that balances, or you've made your peace with accruing additional debt for the month, it's time to try out the budget. The numbers you select are not set in stone, so if your cat needs a $200 unexpected vet visit and you budgeted only $50 for the pets, you can take that $150 shortfall from another category. It's your money, and your budget should be elastic to deal with life's many surprises. One thing I can promise is that the first month will be rocky. Don't give up. The object isn't to get it exactly right the first time, and you aren't going to be any worse off than you were before you started budgeting. Months 2 and 3 may be difficult as well, but over time you should notice that managing your money becomes easier, or at least less stressful. Even if your finances still aren't where you want them to be, you at least know the truth, and you can find a way to address anything in your budget that you want to change. That's it for this week. Next week, I'm going to be talking about taxes, and specifically about how investments are taxed. I hope you'll join me then. If you enjoyed this week's episode of My Money Relaunch, please be sure to hit the like button, leave me a comment down below, and subscribe if you haven't already. And until I see you in the next one, take care.